Good afternoon. Welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Community Development and Regulatory Services Committee for today, April 7th. I've been joined by Councilmember Cano, Quincy, Fry, and Reich. Councilmember Morsami is on his way. We have two sections of our meeting today, a consent agenda as well as a public hearing agenda. I'll start with the consent agenda, which are the regular license applications, including the license for cafe, race, or kitchen. Item number 9 is a rental dwelling license reinstatement. Item 10 is issuing an RFP for the list of eligible providers with regard to employment training. And item 11 is being referred to staff. Are there any items 8 through 11 which anyone would like to pull for discussion? Seeing none, on a motion to approve the consent agenda, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Those items are approved. I'll then move on to item number 7, which is our quasi-judicial public hearing. I understand that staff are interested in postponing this issue one cycle. I'll ask the clerk, do we need to open the public hearing, or can I simply move for a postponement? Okay, thank you to the clerk. I'll move to postpone item number 7 unless there are any objections. Seeing none, all in favor of postponing item 7 signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That item is approved. We'll then move on to item number 1, which is our first public hearing on our 2015 to 2019 consolidated plan. We'll first hear from Mr. Bauer, and I appreciate you coming forward. Then we will be working through a public hearing process. I'll invite anyone who would like to come up to just line up behind the podium. We'll give you each 2 minutes to speak as to the issues with regard to the public hearing, and note that any other comments were welcome in writing. Mr. Bauer, welcome.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, Matt Bauer, the Office of Grants and Special Projects, and what we have before you today is a request for a public hearing on the city's 2015 to 2019 5-year consolidated plan strategy, as well as a 2015 action plan. The City Council passed the budget for these funds in December based on a HUD estimate, on estimates of what we might be receiving from HUD. These final award numbers were presented to the city on February 10th, and the action also requests approval of a revised Schedule 4 in the city budget to account for those funds. These funds are the Community Development Block Grant, the Home Investment Partnerships, Emergency Solutions Grant, and Housing Opportunities for Persons with AIDS funding. The HOPWA funds are spent throughout the metropolitan area. The other funds are within the city's purview. With that, I would request that the public hearing be open. These comments will be summarized in the consolidated plan, and any written comments will be included in as well in the plan that goes to HUD on April 17th.
Are there any questions for Mr. Bauer on item number 1? Thank you for your report, Mr. Bauer. I will open the public hearing on item 1. Invite anyone who'd like to speak to step forward. There are 5 people who are signed up. I don't think we need to be formal enough that we have to have them in an order. I'd ask you, hi, Ms. Flo, would you hold on one moment? Ask everyone to line up if they'd like to speak on the consolidated plan. Please state your name and address for the record, and Councilmember Quincy will monitor the timing clock. Ms. Kastner, welcome.
Thank you, Councilmember Goodman. I'm here on behalf of the Advisory Committee on Aging, MPHA and MHRC, and the Heritage Park Senior Campus. I'm going to address only the non-housing community development needs, specifically infrastructure on page 86. I urge the council to address the poor condition of proper curb cuts for persons with disabilities. Many of them are in disrepair or non-existent, or have big bumps. So with walker and wheelchair, they're difficult. Some have extremely steep rakes so that you cannot easily go up without a risk of falling with a wheelchair. Some are around the corner rather than at the curb cut. So like on Olson Highway, if you want to go to the farmer's market, you have to actually go out into the line of traffic on Olson Highway. in order to use the curb cut. And please address the new West Link to 394 has been open for a year and a half, since the fall of 2013. They still have not developed the block north and south of Glenwood, and there is no signage anywhere. It's not even programmed into the GPS. And
Gassner.
even though it's been open for a year
Ms.
and a half,
Gassner.
no one even knows it's there.
Thank you for your testimony. Please step forward, state your name and address for the record.
My name is Michelle Nast, and do you want my work address or my home address?
Either one.
1000 East 80th Street, Bloomington, 55420.
Thank you.
Members of the committee, my name is Michelle Nast, and I am a Community Resource Coordinator with Cornerstone. Thank you to the members of the Committee to Development and Regulatory Services Committee for taking comments on the Minneapolis proposed fiscal year 2015-2019 consolidated plan. I would like to specifically address the intersection of homelessness and domestic violence and sexual assault. Cornerstone provides victim services to those who have experienced or are experiencing domestic abuse, sexual assault, and human sex trafficking. As a result of our work in this field, we know that domestic and sexual violence are leading causes of housing instability. Almost 1/3 of homeless women are homeless as a result of domestic abuse. 46% of homeless women reported that they had previously stayed in an abusive relationship because they had nowhere to go. And in a 2012 survey of domestic violence providers in Minnesota, 92% of unmet needs of domestic violence victims were for housing. National leaders and local leaders have recognized the intersections of domestic and sexual violence and homelessness. For example, the Violence Against Women Act of 2005 and 2013 created protections for victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, stalking, and teen dating violence from being denied housing or evicted for reasons directly related to domestic violence, stalking, and dating violence. In light of the prevalent co-occurrence of domestic and sexual violence and homelessness, we would like to share our concerns about certain statistics in the draft plan.
About 15 seconds.
On page 15, under characteristics of residents and public housing programs, there are 0 reported cases of domestic violence and sexual assault in Minneapolis public housing. Based on my work, and I can anecdotally remember 8 clients that, while living in Minneapolis public housing and recipients of Section 8, were victims of domestic violence and sexual assault.
Thank you.
So thank you for your testimony. I'll note that our staff have been across the health department, the police department, city attorney's office, and grants and special projects have been working on collecting this data with the help of providers this week. So I've seen a number of emails that have gone out trying to get the correct data, and you can ask Mr. Bauer about that. He's been leading that effort. So thank you for bringing that issue forward.
Thank you.
Ms. Watlaw Phillips, welcome.
Madam Chair, committee members, Sue Watlow Phillips. I'm the Executive Director of the Metropolitan Interfaith Council on Affordable Housing, MICA, and President and CEO of Integrated Community Solutions. My address is 1355 Hillcrest Drive, Northeast, Fridley, Minnesota. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on the consolidated plan. As people of faith, we believe that we are to love and treat others the way that we treat ourselves, and without exception, that everyone has a decent, safe, accessible, and affordable home, and that includes rental as well as home ownership. A few comments right now, and then we'll be submitting additional comments. One is that people impacted by poverty, homelessness, and affordable housing need to be at the decision-making table. And so we're working with One Family, One Community that's represented here, Voice of East African Women, and other congregations and organizations here in Minneapolis to provide opportunities for everyone to be at the table and to provide opportunities for everyone to have an affordable, decent place to live. We are very concerned about the analysis of impediments to fair housing. If you've not read it, I encourage you to do that because you're staking all of these dollars on this. And so we think it's significantly flawed. You'll hear more from Mr. Wilkinson about that, and we are going along with many of the comments that he's going to be making too. We ask you to amend this before submitting the plan. Otherwise, we think that it's going to create problems for the city down the road. We have several thousand vacant units in the Minneapolis area and 250,000 across the state of Minnesota. We passed a law called the Home law, housing opportunities made equitable last year at the state capitol, 31 very diverse groups working with Micah to address the disparity in home ownership between white and non-white. We are the third worst now in the country. We were the worst at the beginning of last year. We think that we can use a lot of the vacant housing here in Minneapolis and make it home ownership and rental housing for people. Minnesota Housing's already put $21.3 million into it. We're asking for an additional $100 million into that.
About 15.
We want to make sure everyone has the choice to live wherever in the community, and we want to make sure that throughout all of our neighborhoods there's affordable housing. We want to make sure that we enforce our fair housing and civil rights law so that everyone's rights are protected. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Will Stansel. I'm here representing the Institute on Metropolitan Opportunity at the University of Minnesota. And we'll be submitting much more detailed written comments, but we'd like to very briefly highlight what we consider a very serious flaw with the consolidated plan, which is the aforementioned adoption of the Fair Housing Implementation Council's analysis of impediments. As Minneapolis did not draft the analysis itself and may be unaware of its deficiencies, we'd like to alert the city to the severe danger of this document may pose to a number of its federal funding streams. As you know, Minneapolis, as a recipient of certain HUD funding, including CDBG grants, is required to certify that it affirmatively furthers fair housing. The analysis of impediments is the key to this process. Unfortunately, the Twin Cities AI is plagued by at least 7 critical deficiencies, all of which undermine its usefulness as a policy document. These are as follows. First, it contains virtually no analysis whatsoever, and it only functions as a repository of basic statistical data. Second, it completely ignores the public sector as a source of impediments. Third, it does not directly discuss or analyze regional segregation. Fourth, it does not appear to utilize the region's recent Fair Housing Equity Assessment, which contains extensive information about segregation and housing impediments. Fifth, it makes minimalistic recommendations and cedes most of the responsibility for developing those recommendations to future policymakers. Sixth, it does not report the outcomes of the recommendations in the previous AI, and it does not suggest any system for monitoring the results of its own recommendations. And finally, it was not developed in coordination with essential regional partners, such as civil rights organizations or major state agencies. One example that might briefly illustrate how deficient this AI is, the AI for the city of Moorhead, Minnesota, which has a population of 39,000 people, contains a more comprehensive overview of zoning and land use laws than the Twin Cities Regional AI, which purports to analyze a region of 2.8 million people. The AI also appears to rely on an erroneous legal conclusion. It suggests repeatedly that it is not required to analyze housing impediments unless those impediments arise directly from the HUD funding sources that triggered the need for the AI. This is absolutely incorrect.
Mr. Senzel, your time is up. You can feel free to submit your comments in writing.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Wilkinson,
Thank you, James.
welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. James Wilkinson, Legal Aid, Minneapolis, 431st Avenue North, Minneapolis. We represent low-income and disabled people throughout Minnesota. I'm not going to repeat what Mr. Stenzel said. That's the first point I wanted to make, that the analysis of impediments is inadequate, and I think that the city has already been challenged in court by certain landlords, Ron Folger and others, Andrew Ellis, for not paying attention to these requirements. I think that there are other challenges that have been made to local units of government and the state for the same thing, and it does endanger the $13 million a year that the city has if it relies on this flawed analysis. We gave 40 pages, I and 12 other organizations gave them 40 pages of suggestions on how they could improve it, and they adopted virtually nothing. I want to address just a few issues that we have brought to the attention of the Implementation Council. Discrimination in housing. The AI includes reports about discrimination that our agency and others have seen in Minneapolis and across the region, but discrimination is not identified as an impediment. It's critical to name the problem and for the city of Minneapolis to address it. Housing segregation. The AI doesn't propose any actions to address the fact that housing is more and more segregated. Minneapolis should support Section 8 mobility programs and ordinance changes to make sure that voucher holders have opportunities to rent, not in very limited areas, but throughout the region and throughout the city. Homeownership gaps, we'll work on that as well with you. I think in order to avoid potential problems and to move forward in this area, the City Council needs to make a commitment that it and staff will work on coming up with an amended analysis of impediments before the next consolidated plan report that's due in November. We'd be happy to work with you on that, and I think it'll make for a better city and for a protective approach to policymaking here. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Wilkinson, for your time. Is there anyone else here to speak to this issue? Anyone? Anyone? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing. The action in front of us is to make sure that we receive and file all the public comments through the 30-day comment period and direct staff to summarize the comments for the consolidated plan, as well as authorizing the submittal of the plan to HUD and approving the document itself. Are there comments or questions with regard to the action being asked of us today? Seeing none, I'll move approval of the consolidated plan as approved by Mr. Bauer and staff. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That item is approved. We'll then move on to item number 2, which is a license fee for tiered rental license and condo ordinance. I'll note this is also a public hearing. Ms. Velde, welcome.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Joanne Velde. I'm the Deputy Director of Housing Inspection Services. I'm here today representing Regulatory Services in recommending some ordinance amendments to Title 12, Chapter 244, Subdivisions 244, 1880, License Fees, and 244.1890, Inspection Guidelines, and to set tier license fees in Appendix J's as of July 15th, 2015. I'm going to kind of review a PowerPoint that we did put together because I think it's really important to educate the public about why we're here today making these amendments. The real guiding philosophy is that we would like to deploy city resources to rental properties, needing the most attention while ensuring all rental properties are inspected on a reasonable cycle. Recover inspection costs for each tier within each property size. Create a financial incentive for property owners to address problems. Properties in the higher tiers will be inspected more frequently and charged higher fees. Properties in the lower tier will be inspected less frequently and have lower fees. We will review all properties annually to move them up or down a different tier. Current and proposed fee schedule for implementation for July of 2015. The current billing model is $69 for the first unit and $19 for each additional unit within the same building. Condominiums can be bundled in the same way into one license if the owner owns multiple units within the same building. Late penalties start at 50%, and if not paid, late fees are removed and substituted with a $250 plus $20 per unit administrative fee. The new billing model. A time study was done to determine inspections time by building and dwelling units. Buildings were clustered by building size. Pricing analysis was done to determine inspection cost by hour. Inspection cycles was analyzed for each tier and building size. Fees are proposed for the inspections needed. Tier 1, fewer inspections, well-managed buildings. Tier 2, more often inspections, challenged buildings. Tier 3, frequent inspections, multiple issues with building. Rental licenses are tiered into Tier 1 to Tier 3 based on objective criteria. Billing is based on where the rental license falls within the tiers and how many units are in the building. The additional units within that building, the fee has been reduced from $19 to $5 per unit, regardless of the number of units in the building. Late penalties in the new amendments start at 25%. And if 45 days late, another 25% penalty will be added. If no payment, we do have the authority to issue an immediate citation of $500 to a property owner for operating without a license. How does this compare to existing fee structure? Single family, currently $69. The increase for a tier 1 property will be $70. It's a $1 increase. For tier 2, it will go up to $112, and for tier 3, it will go up to $373. Condo units are the same. We treat them like a single family home, but if there are multiple units, I mean, obviously smaller unit condos could be a problem, and so we want to tier them in the same fashion as we're tiering the single family units. Fourplexes, currently it's $126. Proposed tier 1 will be $97. Proposed tier 2 will be $178. Proposed tier 3 will be $342. 16-unit building, currently $354. Proposed tier 1 will be $250. Proposed tier 2 will be $425. Proposed tier 3 will be $775. What is the impact on existing license holders? Expected outcome is that we incentivize property owners into tier 1 compliance. So our goal is to have all the rental buildings in Minneapolis as tier 1. That's our goal. The city recovers expenses from those requiring more city services to maintain their properties within acceptable standards. Tier 1 owners in 1 to 3 units and 1 to 3 unit condos would essentially see no major change. Those in 4+ units or 4+ condo units owned by the same licensee would see their fees decrease. Tier 2 and Tier 3 owners would see varying degrees of increases based on the amount of time and resources needed to achieve compliance. What is the impact on existing license holders? Staff is currently working to add elements similar to the good cause criteria and incorporating elements relating to fire code and fire safety to include multifamily units in these tiers, and subsequently rescore all properties in preparation for implementation of this new model. Although the majority of our compliance efforts are targeted to 1 to 6 unit buildings, larger multifamily units currently pay higher cost. The new model will more accurately reflect the cost of service needed for each building size and tier. What are the tiers generally based on? Tier inspection schedule started in 2011 and is generally based on the criteria established in Minneapolis Code of Ordinances 244-1890 regarding an objective and systematic approach to inspections of rental dwellings. 244-1890's current proposed amendments include general guidelines the department has used for good cause license actions. They include the following: the number of administrative citations or special assessments associated with the code enforcement at a property, the number of director's notices for noncompliance of a license standard violation, the number of inspections and violations issued at a property, the number of notices relating to operating a substandard rental property, rental dwellings with police incidents for drug offenses, prostitution, crimes of force or violence, and loud parties. I do want to reiterate that when the ordinance was enacted back in 1991, police calls were a data element that we could use to inspect properties more frequently than others. It wasn't the only data element. But we made some changes because we want to make sure it's clear that it is incidences that are occurring on the property.
Not each individual call for the same
Exactly.
incident.
Exactly. All right.
Okay. Thank you very much for your report. I thought I saw our director here. I just wanted to see if she had anything she wanted to add to Ms. Valde's report, which was very clear and well done. Thank you. But when we have the director of a major division charter department in here, I'd like to invite her to speak.
Thank you so much, Councilmember. Thank you so much for all having me here. I just wanted to say that for us, this has been a long time coming. We have looked at this really intentionally, purposefully for a bit over a year now. We hired an outside consultant to really take a look at the work we do It is meant to do mostly two purposes. It's really to incentivize property owners to come down into compliance efforts and to come down in tiers, and which means that they're complying with what we're requiring them to do as a city. And it's also about really shifting costs to those who require our service more, and a cost recovery measure. None of this change and proposed license fee is meant to be punitive in any way. It is really meant and corresponds to the level of service delivery that we give throughout the city. And we're hoping actually to incentivize people to really come down into compliance. It is but one tool in our toolbox of what we're trying to do to really promote safety and security in our properties. So we hope that you will take this proposal, and we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, are there any questions for Maria or her staff with regard to these proposals? Councilmember Frye.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First off, thank you. I know you've been hard at work at this for over a year right now. I think this ranking system is a wonderful solution. It's kind of a private market solution based on a publicly numerical grades. So I think it's really impressive. So thank you to staff, thank you to Council President, as well as Mr. Smith. I know Cecil has been very involved in this as well. Just a couple of overarching questions. First, where is the numerical grade going to be posted and sort of publicly available?
We certainly right now, we have a tiering system in place where we have what that score looks like, and that if you score between X and Y, this is a tier 1 property. If you score between A and B, this is a tier 2. We will be posting this. In this in particular instance, we're actually excited to have taken a proposal, and it stemmed from, in my first week or so here, a meeting I had with the Multi-Housing Association, which was, we'd like to see tiers right on the license. And I thought we would have to wait till Elms to do that. And I am told that we can actually do that right now. So when the new tiering, and IT is working with us right now to incorporate the new data elements that correspond, some of them to what we do with good cause, and some of them really to elevate, because we're doing multifamily for the first time. We had not done fire code in that. So as we elevate that into the coding system, when a license is issued, the tier is there so that tenants actually can see what kind of property they're going into, which is also really good for tenants as they are looking and reviewing properties. But we will also be able to post the tiers online on the website. So we will be pushing that data out publicly.
And to clarify, the licenses which have the numerical grade, they're posted then on the front of the building generally?
Yes, they are required by ordinance to be posted in the front of the building.
Okay.
Or in the building in a common area, I should say.
That makes sense. Another one, which is really, I think, just hopefully will be a result of the success we're going to see, is as we move away from higher numbers of tier 3 buildings, and those buildings then shift into tier 2 and then hopefully to tier 1, in a sense, that's success. We've solved the problem that we're trying to fix right now, which is structures that are deficient or poorly managed buildings.
It does, absolutely. Madam Chair, Councilmember Frye, I think that that's exactly what we're trying to do. We're really trying to push properties into tier 1 in a different way. And whether you land in a tier 1, 2, or 3, really at some point is your responsibility as a property manager. You have taken this on as a profession, and we're asking you to really step up to the plate and make sure that you know what you're getting into.
Right.
And we're hoping really to incentivize and drive people down into tier 1. That is our model.
And that makes sense. I guess my question is then, as we move these, as we have success, then the amount of revenue that we're going to be receiving based on these fees will obviously decrease, because the amount that you have to pay for a tier 1 is less than that which you have to pay for a tier 3. And I don't want that to result in, say, like a layoff of inspectors when those inspectors are actually needed in other places. I'm sure
Absolutely. And what will happen then, and it is something that at some point perhaps I may have to come answer to you for in terms of what our staffing looks like and what our resources look like. The reality is that if everyone stays in the same tier right now and we add the elements of the multifamily, right now we're looking at approximately 3 to 4% of properties that are in tier 3. Another 32 or 30 that are in tier 2. So if that remains the same, the city may see an additional revenue in under $300,000. So again, it is not necessarily meant to be recourse to add revenue to the city's coffers. If, as we hope, we continue to drive this down, we will see a different model, and that may be something I need to answer here today in terms of, or subsequently in the future, when we're talking about revenue and what that looks like for our budget. But I'll be happy to do that if it means that we've got properties that are in better compliance. And we can either then use our staff to look at other issues that perhaps we don't have time for now. Because we are so busy responding to multiple calls on a small percentage of bad properties.
I think that makes sense. One final question. Actually, this final question you've already answered for me individually, but just so that everybody else can hear as well, and that's related to these tiers are based on for the luxury or the quality of the building. They're really based on how the building itself is managed.
Yes.
And you've already answered this question, but how can we ensure that we are not too hard on owners that are doing a really good job and are taking some of these more traditionally individuals that have, whether it's mental illness or substance dependency, straight from homelessness. I mean, obviously, a lot of times there are more calls associated with them, and I don't want to discriminate against the individuals that are doing the work to bring those people in.
Absolutely. Madam Chair, Councilmember Frye, I appreciate the question. It is something that we continue to struggle with in terms of finding balance. It is something that has come up previously before as we've been talking about amendments to the conduct on premise ordinance as well. We are cognizant that when we touch rental, that we perhaps touch particular communities more than others, but I will argue and strongly state that doing nothing will also have similar disparate impacts, and so we have to move forward with doing some kind of activity. With regards to particular land or property owners that take on challenges that perhaps others don't want to do, there are property owners that take on persons that are coming from homelessness, persons that are coming perhaps from a prison setting, people that suffer from chemical dependencies, in which case housing might be difficult to find, who may not have a credit history, and that might also be difficult to find. The discretion afforded the department precisely is for that reason. And similar to what we do with Good Cause, we sit down with folks, we look at the circumstances, we look at the overarching calls, we look at any mitigating circumstances, and we were able to adjust as needed. And so that is something that we really strive to balance hard for. We do it now. We will continue to do so in the future.
So it's really looked at as on a case-by-case basis.
Yes, it is.
Really. Well, I agree with you. I think this is a wonderful proposal, and I'll be supporting it. And thank you for your work, Maria. Excuse me, Ms. Rivera.
I want to note that Council President Johnson, who is our chief author, has joined us and has been here for the whole meeting, actually, and see if she had any comments to add before we open the public hearing.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just really want to thank staff for all the good work on this. And, I've talked to every single one of you about particular properties. And I want to assure my colleagues that even at $373 for some of these Tier 3 properties, that's a minuscule amount to the actual cost of riding herd on some of the folks who take advantage of the situation and don't act responsibly in this profession that they've chosen to manage property. But I also think this ordinance sets the balance of making sure that we're not onerous on people who do a good job in our city of providing rental housing, and recognizes that they are quality landlords and offer good spaces for people to live in, and we don't hassle them. So to me, it's all about that, trying to capture the revenue, try and spend the time on the people that are really causing the problems. And for me, I'm really glad that we're at this point, and I again appreciate all the good work that has gone into this and thoughtfulness, because it is a challenge, Councilmember Frye, as you're talking about people that are hard to house. I have a lot of people that are hard to house in my neighborhoods, and I can tell you the names of 5 people that do it, 5 landlords that do it just great, and I can give you the names of many that don't. And what we want to do is bring those people that don't into the side that manages well. But it is a challenge. It is a challenge, but it can be done. And some people do it right. And to have that Tier 1 on your license, I think that's a fantastic thing for tenants to be able to say, this is a responsible landlord. This is where I want to live. And so again, thank you so much for all the work on this.
Okay, thank you very much for being here today. We're going to open the public hearing on item number 2. There are only a handful of folks who are signed up. I would invite our friend Mr. Wilkerson to come up first. And others, Mr. Friends has signed up. And then there are others I'm not sure. Marty McDowell, are you here for this? Okay. Maybe you could line up behind Mr. Wilkerson. We'll start the timer as well.
Jay Wilkinson, Legal Aid, Tier 2 lawyer, hoping for Tier 1. Hearing seems like a good idea. We've repeatedly talked to staff and I think to the council over the years that we want to make sure that the victims of domestic violence, people with disabilities and the like, not be penalized by the city or their landlords for calling for emergency services. Let's do that in this change. Federal law recognizes that women are more often victims of domestic violence, and courts have ruled that penalizing victims of domestic violence for calling for public services is a violation of their rights under federal law, and I think that we would agree would be a violation of their rights under the city ordinance as well. We know that the leadership of regulatory services in this city council doesn't want to see this happen. We'll use its discretion widely. However, it's not them who are going to be dealing with the tenants on a day-to-day basis and reacting to situations where police calls are made or emergency calls are made. It's the managers, the landlords. So, a fair housing perspective on this, which I bring to every single time I come to this body, would include a clear statement that tenants may not be penalized for emergency services calls for domestic violence, for their disability needs and the like. We had a client a few years ago who was evicted because after her roommate called after a suicide attempt. Happily, that wasn't Minneapolis. But that's not the kind of result we want in this ordinance, and I would hope that before the ordinance is finalized that something could be added to ensure that protected class people are protected. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony.
Good afternoon, Chair Goodman, members of the committee. My name is Marty McDonough. I'm a Director of Municipal Affairs for the Minnesota Multi-Housing Association, which is the state's trade association for apartment owners, managers, and product service companies headquartered in Bloomington, Minnesota. Our 2,100 members own and manage over 300 housing units throughout the state. I want to start by thanking Council President Johnson for bringing this forward and for the remainder of the City Council for considering these changes, and certainly to the Department of Regulatory Services, whom we've been working with for some time on these changes. Our position has been to support the implementation of a fair and reasonable tiered licensing system that rewards professional management of any rental property and brings significant regulatory and enforcement action on licensees who are not meeting performance standards as prescribed by city ordinance. We think the framework for a fair tiered licensing system is present in the language before you today. It rewards professional management through the new license fee structure, certainly, and the fee structure also clearly brings significant regulatory and enforcement action on the lower tiered properties. We do have concerns, however, that the language before you does not go far enough in prescribing what exactly are the criteria to be used when assessing where a given property will end up in the tiering system. For example, the introductory paragraph to the changes in Ordinance 244.1890 states, quote, "The guidelines shall be based upon, but not limited to, the following factors deemed by the director to promote an efficient inspection program," followed by a list of 7 guidelines. We think there are significantly more factors which ought to be considered and would argue that these decisions would probably be best made through a public discussion of this committee of elected officials rather than by delegating it solely to the Director of Regulatory Services. Our membership is very diverse, and their business interests run from the very small owner-occupied properties to the new shiny apartment towers being erected around Minneapolis. The housing stock across the city is also very diverse, and this new system must be set up in a way through which all are treated fairly.
Sir, I think we're wrapped out of time.
Okay, thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time. Mr. Friends, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members, for the opportunity to speak here today.
My name is Steve Friends. My office address is 12 East 25th Street. I live in Southwest Minneapolis. I'm a lifelong resident, and I'm very, very supportive of this ordinance, and I think it's about time. I feel like many have borne the cost of inspections where it's been spent on a few for a long time, and this is a good fix that I think encourages landlords to behave properly, and I hope that we see this passed. However, I do have some issues, and I would recommend some changes in that there are no objective criteria that are delineated in the ordinance. Rather, it's a list of some possibilities and some discretion of the director. Wherein I have a lot of respect for the director and what she's done in a very short period of time, I do think there needs to be delineated what the expectations are, particularly in the area of number of calls when we have 311 posters telling our residents to call the city rather than the landlord, which is an easy fix. I think you're encouraging calls when they don't necessarily need to be made. Number two, I'm very concerned with police calls, as legal aid clearly stated. There is bound to be some disparate impact based off of that, and I think we do need to have discretion, or discretion is good, but not always. Discretion to a degree where the landlord is working with people and working with the city in order to resolve issues as they arise. Because we do have opportunities to take a chance from time to time with someone that does need an opportunity. The other last point I want to make is there's no process in this for appeal. So there's some system out here that we're not allowed to see what that box has, the black box, and how it comes out, but there's no process for appeal. And I think there needs to be something incorporated in here for that. So again, I'm very supportive of this, and I appreciate your work on this. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Hello.
Hello. My name is Cecil Smith, Madam Chair, and I office at 1818 14th Avenue South. I am a resident of Minneapolis. I own Cornerstone Property Professionals, and I'm a licensed real estate broker. I also serve on the executive committee of the Minnesota Multi-Housing Association, and I chair the Municipal Affairs Committee of the association. So I wear many hats today. I'm an owner, a manager in the city. I'm a neighbor to multifamily, and a policy thinker at industry level. And today is an exciting day. You have a new regulatory framework before you that I believe is fairer and brings to bear market forces on rental housing in our fair city. And I congratulate Director Nuria Rivera Vandemide and Deputy Director Joanne Valdi and their team who've worked very diligently toward this new ordinance. This ordinance is fairer because it rewards good management and well-maintained property, and it ends our subsidization through our license fees of a significant compliance efforts that's made by regulatory services towards negligent and absentee owners. And it's time for them to pay their freight, and hopefully they will be regulated into compliance. The ordinance brings to bear market forces. If I'm a prospective renter walking into a rental property and see the license posted where it should be, and there's a big watermark number on that license, 1, 2, or 3, there's going to be a reaction. Peace of mind and encouraged interest in a property with a Tier 1 notation, and an about-face, out-the-door reaction for Tier 3. I will be marketing my anticipated Tier 1 designation, and if I don't, I predict social media will do it for me through Yelp and other outlets. I believe that our efforts to achieve Tier 1 will be rewarded with even better quality qualified residents, longer-term residents, and an improved income statement, and consequently higher valuations. But I have one concern. The language in 1890 puts the tiered licenses entirely at the discretion of regulatory services. Well, that may be fine with the current director and the current city council. Many of the large owners in Minneapolis have been in the business longer than the entire careers of those overseeing our industry. And I believe for the tiering to be credible and fair for the long term through multiple directors, there needs to be public input and at least policy oversight. As with every law,
Running up.
Is there anyone else here to speak to this issue? Please step forward, state your name and address for the record.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Committee member Sue Watlow Phillips with MICA. I just want to reiterate a few things that have already been said. You know, obviously one of the concerns I have is for people that have difficulty getting into housing. Accessibility is a major issue both in the city as well as across the state and the country for folks that do have criminal histories, mental health, family size, other types of challenges that have experienced homelessness. And so we want to make sure that this does not create an incentive for landlords not to do this so they can move to being a tier 1 property. And so we want to make sure that we do continue to have that accessibility. I think there needs to be a clear checklist of what makes you go into tier 3, tier 2, and tier 1 so that landlords know what they have to do to change, and that's clearly something that they can appeal. And then also for our newer landlords, especially our newer immigrant landlords that may not speak the language, may not know, all of our regulations as well as they need to, is that we're providing them with the resources to be able to access that. The other concern I have is that as landlords can basically say that they're tier 1, that they may raise rents also. And we certainly have a very tight rental market right now, and a very low number of units that are available for people that are at minimum wage, on public assistance, on retirement benefits. And so we need to keep an eye on those things too. So I think having a clear system that everybody knows what the rules are and what the expectations are and how they move from one tier to another is important. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here who'd like to speak to this issue? Anyone? Anyone? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. I have a couple of questions for Nuria, most specifically Mr. Wilkinson's question with regard to the language on folks who make calls, for example, for domestic abuse, and your thoughts with regard to the language you proposed, but just generally what your thoughts are about that issue.
Sure. Madam Chair, thank you. Members of the committee, I want to make sure that that everyone knows that currently right now, we do not take into account police calls that are protected, whether it be for domestic violence or perhaps some other issues. We scrub those calls very carefully. We have weighted them in the past lower because we don't think that just calls by themselves necessarily should promote a particular action one way or the other, but they are part of the resources that are used. The current framework is something that we use for a good cause currently right now, and it's something that we actually use in the existing tiering model, which is to use police calls to the extent that we have vetted them to not be repetitive, not the same neighbor calling about a loud party 800 times in a row because there's time, but we know there's one incident and we've got to deal with that. We are really looking at fights and other violent incidents that are not protected. So we are very mindful about the kind of police calls that we're using and to not include any of those that are in the protected class.
And then my second question has to do with this issue of appeals.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you could address that. What is the law? Does the law require us to have an appeal process?
Madam Chair, currently we have checked with the City Attorney's Office and the law does not require an appeals process. We are, similar to what we do with the good cause process right now, we'll do an administrative review. We will look at that internally. There could be circumstances, it could be a data quality issue, there could be circumstances where we want to, again, take in the discretion looking at a case-by-case basis depending on if you are providing services to persons that are coming out of chemical dependency and what that looks like. Can we look at that property in a different way? And so depending on the mitigating circumstances and what that property looks like, we will take a look at that. But that is certainly an administrative review and we can adjust tiering depending on that.
Okay, and then I guess with regard to the language, Mr. Wilkinson suggested, do you have an objection to that language?
In terms of ensuring that protected calls are not utilized? No.
Okay, so perhaps Mr. Wilkinson and I can work together to have an amendment that we could bring forward at the council meeting just to clarify that. Maybe Nuria and I and you can work on that. Outside, I don't want to start writing it right here and now. So we'll take care of that one issue, which I since there's no objection, it seems like that would make some sense. Are there other questions for Nuria or other discussion generally? Maybe I'll just start to make it easier by moving approval of the staff recommendation, asking to be added as an author as the chair of the committee. And I guess I'll wait till the end to speak. Councilmember Fry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Rivera, just one other question about the discretion which was brought up. What are your thoughts on having sort of this administrative review process as opposed to bringing it forward to the council in terms of policy, any sort of policy reshape? Does that make sense?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Fry, I think when we had thought about this, we think of the time and the resources it would take if we provided a full appellate provision, which is not required by law, the time it takes to move that through both an internal appeals process, a formal appeals process, and committee. By that time, we might be into another year. Our tiering are really based on a 12-month period, and so it seems an easier approach, and frankly, the better one to promote conversation, to upstream the conversation, is to really have an administrative review for those people who want to come in and challenge their tier. Happy to do that, and we will, as we roll this out, that will be one of the resource numbers that we make available, just like we do with Good Cause right now. Good Cause, I should note, started out with over 100 some owners, and we have now in the last quarter gotten down to 75. So clearly the efforts that we're doing to advertise what good compliance means, what good property ownership means, is having an effect, and we hope that this will also induce people to come down.
So I want to add to that also. Our job is to vote on whether or not we think that this director would be a good director, and to set policy as it pertains to fair housing, safe housing, and for me, affordable housing in the city of Minneapolis. It is not to get into the detail of whether or not some violation or another causes you to be a tier 1 or tier 2. And as the chair of this committee, I can tell you we are not going to want to take on those issues. Do we really want a situation where you have tenants on one side coming and telling us all of the horrible things generally their good landlord has done to them for a variety of reasons, and the landlord with the multifamily housing association and others sitting on the other side telling us how terrible the tenant is and how bad their behavior is? That is not within our wheelhouse. Our wheelhouse is to set policy and to pick the director. And we were elected for a 4-year term to do so, and that this director's appointment, I think, comes up during our tenure here. That's what our level of responsibility is, not to get into the details of whether or not someone's various issues made them be a tier 2 or a tier 3. I'll also note there are very few tier 3 properties, correct?
We estimate 3 to 4% of all our properties, which is less than, it's about 644 at the last time we took a look at it. And when we add multi-housing, we'll see how that shakes out with the new adjustments that we have made. So yes.
So most of the properties, for the most part, are doing a very good job of providing safe and not generally affordable housing in the city of Minneapolis. So we're doing well in that regard. There's bad apples in every bunch. Mm-hmm. There's going to be some of those. Hopefully we won't determine that we have to raise revenue to keep our operations going in order to deal with that small group of people. My only tiny concern is that we hear later we've done such a good job. Now we have to charge more. Now we have to figure out a different way of charging for more service to keep more people employed. If we can get to the point of more properties doing better, good for us. The whole city rises as a result of that. So I think I just want to be conscious we're not trying to put our keep our tier 3s in business to keep jobs, or put our tier 3s out of business and then worry about raising fees on everybody else in order to cover doing more inspections.
Madam Chair, thank you so much. I think that's exactly why we want to be open about it. When we get to the tiers, we will put criteria out there. We will put who's in tier what, and you will be able to see what puts you in tier. We are not trying to hide anything. We are trying to be transparent. And I will come before you again when the time comes if we have to adjust where our staffing is, where our resources are, because we've done such a good job. Because ultimately, my goal is to make sure compliance is upheld throughout the city.
So I have made a motion to approve the staff recommendation subject to an amendment at the council meeting with regard to this very specific language that Legal Aid and I are going to work on together. Council President Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to make it clear, though, am I wrong in my assumption that the rental license fee structure that we have right now or anticipated covers entirely the cost of rental license inspections in the city and enforcement? And I would say no.
Madam Chair, Council President Johnson, I would venture to say that the money that we have put forward today, the proposal we have put forward today, is as good as we can find an estimate of what it costs to do repeated, and that's on average, repeated compliance efforts to get those properties. Are there outliers, and does that take into account some of the administrative, some of the overhead, some of the conversations we have to have with community, some of the conversations we have with owners to upstream the process, to put conditions on licenses. That the entirety of that is not currently encompassed in this rental license proposal, but we think it's a fair estimation of where we need to go to with the license fee and in terms of recovering inspector time in particular.
Okay, thank you, thank you. I want us to be certain that it costs us way more to administer this part of our city enterprise than we are taking in license fees alone. Thank you.
Are there other comments or questions with regard to this proposal? Seeing none, on the motion to approve item number 2, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That item is approved. Thank you very much for your work. Thank you all for being here today. We'll then move on to item number 3. Mr. Wilson.
Madam Chair, we have an application by a restaurant at 3501 Nicollet called Ola Arepa. They have been in business for a few years, and they are requesting an expansion of their outdoor patio and a slight expansion of their hours of operation on the outdoor patio. They currently have 32 seats in their original patio. They'd like to add 15 seats. They'd like to increase their hours of use of the patio from 10 p.m. during the week to midnight during the week, and from 11 p.m. on the weekends to 1 a.m. on the weekends. A public hearing is required for this change. We notified all residents and property owners within 300 feet. We also notified the Lindale Neighborhood Association and the Nicollet East Harriet Business Association. We received 2 responses to that notification process. 2 responses, both were opposed. Generally speaking, they're opposed to the noise that the patio will create and a lack of parking. I did review our records for Ola Arepa, and we have not received complaints about the use of that outdoor patio since they've operated it. And they did reconfigure their parking lot so they have parking that meets all of the zoning requirements. So based on our review of the application, we are recommending that you approve the application.
Are there any questions for Mr. Wilson on item number 3? Seeing none, this is a public hearing on item number 3, which is an expansion of premise for Holy Arapaya at 3501 Nicollet Avenue. Is there anyone here to speak to this issue? Anyone? Anyone? Is there anyone here from the restaurant? Great. Food truck to restaurant, we love you for that. Thank you very much for all of your blood, sweat, and tears you put into making that happen. We're very proud to see that happen. I will close the public hearing, move approval of their application. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That item has been approved. Item number 4, Insight Brewing. Mr. Wilson, welcome back.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Insight Brewing is also doing a patio expansion for their brewery tap room operation at 2821 East Hennepin. They are seeking a permanent expansion of the premises for the patio area. The off-street parking required for this expansion is clearly met. The hours of operation will be from 11 till 11 p.m. during the week and midnight on the weekends. Staff's recommendation is to approve.
Are there any questions for Mr. Wilson on item number 2, which is an expansion of premise for Insight Brewing? Seeing none, this is a public hearing on item number 4, which is an expansion of premise at Insight Brewing at 2821 Hennepin Avenue East. Is there anyone here to speak to this issue? Anyone? Anyone? I'll close the public hearing. Are you guys from Insight? Yay, very cool. We're very excited for you. Thank you for sticking it out for an hour. Are there further comments or questions on the motion to approve the request from Insight Brewing? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That item is approved. We'll move on to item number 5, Nighthawks.
Madam Chair, we have an application for a new restaurant at the intersection of 38th and Nicollet. Nighthawk and Birdie at Nighthawks will be located at 3753 Nicollet. They are seeking an on-sale wine and strong beer license. They intend to have seating for 72 persons inside and a 30-seat sidewalk cafe. They will be open during the week. Monday to Friday till 1:30 a.m. And the exterior only until midnight. Food service will be provided all hours of operation. This is the former site of the Shorty and Wags Wings and Ribs restaurant that operated there for many, many years. Public hearing is required. We notified all property owners and residents within 600 feet, and we notified the Kingfield Neighborhood Group and Nicollet East Area Business Association. We received 3 responses from that notification. All 3 are in support. Staff recommends approval.
Are there any questions for staff on item number 5? Seeing none, we'll open the public hearing on item number 5, which is a new business application for Nighthawks at 3753 Nicollet Avenue. Is there anyone here to speak to this issue? No? Anyone? Anyone? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. I'm going to move approval and say I read about this in City Pages, that it was almost about to happen. It looks like we might be one of the final remaining impediments to helping it open. So very, very excited for you about opening up at this location. On the motion to approve, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That item is approved. Thank you for being here today. We'll then move on to our remaining item, making the Remarcheks wait longer than anyone else today, and take on item number 6. Mr. Wilson, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have an application by Paris Porter LLC for a new restaurant combination, Procna and the St. Anthony Main Theater. Well, they will combine the premises at 115 to 125 East Main Street and have an on-sale liquor license for that entire premise. The inside dining and lobby area of this establishment will have seating for 274 persons. It'll have an outdoor sidewalk cafe type dining patio for 132 persons. And it will allow alcohol service in the multiplex theaters of St. Anthony, Maine for another 962 persons. They're requesting full hours of operation for beverage alcohol, which is 2 a.m. Monday through 7 days a week, excuse me. The owner of this establishment is John Remarchek. He is 100% owner and manager of the premises. A public hearing is required because of this expansion. We notified all property owners and residents within 400 feet of this establishment. We also notified the Nicollet Island East Bank Neighborhood Association and the Northeast Business Association. We did receive 1 response from our notification, and it was in support of the application, and staff's recommendation is to approve.
Are there any questions for Mr. Wilson on item number 6? Councilmember Fry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Very supportive of this initiative from Procter moving forward, and thanks to the Remarcheks. A couple of questions. So there was some initial concern in the community that by expanding the coverage of the liquor license, that this could somehow turn into like a nightclub or an event center. So I just wanted to clarify through Mr. Wilson that in fact the business plan is to remain as a restaurant with a couple of slight deviations, and perhaps you can address those.
Madam Chair, Councilmember Fry, yes, in reviewing the business plan submitted by Mr. Remarchek, it is not, he does not intend to provide any kind of nightclub type activity. It's more of a dining establishment where you can socialize in preparation for a movie. There could be special events in the business plan, all kinds of things, Academy Award parties or things like that. But Mr. Remarchek would have to change his business plan in front of this board if he were to change it to a nightclub.
Okay, that makes sense. And the underlying premise of changing sort of the liquor application or applying for the liquor application was to be able to bring beer and wine into the movie theater, which I think is an awesome idea. How exactly, this might even be a better question for Mr. Remarchek, but how exactly does that work? Are you allowed to take the glasses in?
Well, let's
get
open the public hearing. Okay. We're going to open the public hearing on item number 6, which is a new business application for Procna and Theater, including the ability to have liquor at the St. Anthony Main Movie Theater. This is a public hearing. Mr. Remarchek, welcome.
Thank you. I'm John Remarchek. Address is 110 Bank Street, Southeast Minneapolis. I'm just going to take up just a moment to tell you that about 50 years ago today, I applied for my first license in Minneapolis, first alcohol license in Minneapolis. I was the youngest owner at that time. It was the first license being given out, new license in 14 years. Now it's 50 years later. I'm no longer the youngest person, I'm the oldest person applying for a license. It's the same process, and it's been a pleasure living in Minneapolis and doing business here most of the time.
So can you
yeah.
answer the question, how will you get your wine or beer in the theater, is the question.
Yeah, well, with this license, we'll be able to sell it in the theater. There's a big event coming up this weekend, Minneapolis St. Paul International Art and Film Festival. And we may provide wine in the theater, sell wine in the theater. The idea today, it isn't so much about a restaurant making it or not making it. They have their own problems. And the word multiplex, thank you for that, but it's a 5-screen, small 5-screen theater. Our 5 screens are about the size of one normal screen in a normal multiplex, so we're still very small. But without being able to offer drink and food, theaters aren't making it anywhere in the country. And yet new theaters are being built every month, all the time. But they're the big theaters that are having the restaurants and being able to offer drinks. I've never had a drink in a theater. I can't imagine taking a drink into a play or a theater performance. But it's what's happening today, and it's what's very important. Before this, we weren't able to take a drink outside of the premise, and we're expanding the premise so that it can be done. So you can carry your drink into we see it being done, carrying it into all the waiting areas, all the public areas of the theater. We'll be employing the same measures that we do in the other places in terms of checking identification, watching who's drinking it, seeing the drinks aren't passed off to somebody else, same as we do every day in the normal restaurant settings that we operate. It means we ask everybody of any age for an ID, and then we follow it through. So we don't see this as being any boom. It just allows us to be able to provide some services to keep the theater functioning.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So perhaps I was wrong, but are you able to order a glass of beer at Prochna and then carry it into the movie theater?
Yes.
Okay.
And I'm doing the thing that I tell people not to do. But further, the answer is Prochna and the theater are one. It's all one. It's one thing. So, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, John. Is there anyone else here to speak to this issue? Please step forward, state your name and address for the record.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Pete Gelser. I live at 100 2nd Street Southeast, Minneapolis, 55414. We're within the same block where the Prochna and the theaters are. I have a couple of concerns. The first of which is procedural. The only notice that I received of this meeting was from the Nicollet and East Bank Neighborhood Association. No notices came from either Marcy Homes, which is the neighborhood in which we're located, or from the city of Minneapolis. So I'm not sure that everybody was notified of this. They may have been, but we weren't. When I received the notification, I had two concerns. One is, as soon as I saw Class A liquor license, it seemed to me it said in big flashing red letters, nightclub. And obviously, we would oppose anything like a nightclub located in that area. The second thing is, does this license permit amplified outdoor music? If it does, again, I think that's one of those things that we would have a great concern about. When the amplified outdoor music was permitted in the patio area between Tugs and Vicks, there were a lot of concerns, a lot of complaints about the music disturbing people, even though the hours were limited and even though they had a special phone number that you could call if the music was too loud. So it would be a concern that we would have, and it was not made clear.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone else here to speak to this issue? Anyone? Anyone? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing. Mr. Wilson, Marcy Homes is not required to give notification. Can you talk about what the city's notification process was?
Yes, Madam Chair, we did do an actual mailing to property owners and residents, which should have captured all condo occupants and apartment occupants. We did mail 57 of those notices. I will review that after the meeting and make sure all buildings were captured in that. And with regard to the speaker question, the applicant is not intending to have outdoor speakers, and the outdoor area will not have live entertainment. In fact, the outdoor area is licensed as Class E, which allows no live entertainment.
Okay. Is there a clarification of, did he say something incorrectly? Okay. Come up, back to the microphone.
The Proctor restaurant, as it existed, has always had outdoor speakers. They're very small. They carry a little bit of music just to the people that are sitting on the outside. There's no heavy amplification beyond the small speakers that are there, but they've always been there.
Okay.
And they're still there. We intend to use them. Without a little bit of music, it really takes away, a little bit of music takes away a lot of atmosphere from people sitting out there.
Thank you. Mr. Wilson, is this different than what was at Proctor before?
Madam Chair, in reviewing it, the Proctor Sidewalk Cafe is being greatly expanded to include all areas in front of the theater. So it is true that the Proctor had amplification. Our business plan here does not indicate that there's going to be amplified sound in the patio all the way down in front of the theater.
Okay, that's something Councilmember Fry's office will work out with Mr. Marchik and Mr. Wilson in the interim. Is there anyone else here to speak to this issue? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Councilmember Fry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move approval of this item.
Okay, item number 6 has been moved for approval. Further comments or questions? Councilmember Reich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It seems that this is not going to be a revisiting of the Mississippi Live 90s era, more the kind of activities that can take place at the theaters in the theater district like Guthrie. Very consistent with that experience is what I'm hearing.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I'll just note, if you haven't been to the theater lately, they've done a complete renovation of this. And if they couldn't make it at Block E, quite frankly, I really question how they can make it here unless they do something to really update the way it is. And I have a lot of constituents who bemoan what happened with the theaters at Block E. They really love the private theater experience of no one attending except for themselves. I think most of the owners would tell you that that's very bad for business to be showing private movies, and that this is, if we want a theater downtown, a movie theater downtown, and this is one, we have to figure out how to make it succeed, not just only by people attending, but having things that draw people in. So from my point of view, I don't want to see another local theater close, and I don't want to have to go out to the West End. I want to be able to come to the city, have my egg salad with olive sandwich at Rachel's, and then come over and see a movie theater and know that my money is staying locally and not being spent somewhere else. So I think we just have to change with the times. And that's why we all like living downtown, because there's a lot of diversity of things happening. So I also support Councilmember Fry's motion. On the motion to approve, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That item is approved. Seeing no further business before us, we are adjourned.